It was a stuffy night full of forced smiles, the kind where loud music drowns out conversations and the atmosphere seems to vibrate with the tension in the air. The party was elegant, full of familiar faces, but my eyes were fixed on just two of them. There she was, my wife, dancing with a man I had never seen before. Her dress sparkled under the colored lights, and her movements seemed deliberately provocative. He held her waist with an easy smile, while she gave him a look that was a mix of defiance and desperation. My heart was beating fast, and my hands were sweating. Betrayal wasn't just a suspicion at that moment, it was a certainty. When the song finally ended, I walked over to her. Walking across the dance floor, I felt every pair of eyes on me. She noticed my approach and stopped, rigid as a statue, while the man, unaware of what was about to happen, was still smiling at her. My eyes turned to him, but my words were to her. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low and controlled, but filled with anger that burned like an ember. She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't say anything. His hesitation was all I needed. "Don't bother answering," I continued, with frightening calm. "Now it's my turn to talk. Get ready, because I'm going to divorce you." The silence around us was deafening. The man took a step back, eyes wide, while she stared at me, pale, unable to utter any words. I turned around and left, ignoring the growing hubbub of people around us. My heart was heavy, but my determination was stronger. There were no more doubts. My life, up to that point, had been a well-rehearsed lie, and I was about to dismantle the theater. I got home before her. I sat on the couch, staring into space. That was where it all started. Every promise, every kiss, every plan for the future. Everything seemed so distant now, like a story I was reading from the outside. When I finally heard the door open, she entered with hesitant steps, trying to gauge my reaction. "I can explain," she began, but I raised my hand, interrupting her. "I don't want to hear your explanations. I want to know the truth. The whole truth." She hesitated for a moment, before finally breaking down. The words came out fast and confused, as if trying to explain would make what she had done less terrible. "It means nothing. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. He's nothing to me." But her voice was shaking, and her eyes avoided mine, revealing more than she would have liked. "A moment of weakness?" I echoed, laughing humorlessly. "Do you think it's that simple? That the lies, the secrets, the nights you went out without saying where you were going, can all be reduced to a moment of weakness?" She started to cry, but there was no room for compassion in my chest. All he felt was anger, and that anger was cold, methodical. I took out my cell phone, showed the messages I had found weeks before, the conversations that had made me start to put the pieces together. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my voice firm. "Do you think I didn't notice? That I didn't see the signs? The difference is that I waited to be sure. Now I know. And now, you're going to face the consequences." She fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness, promising that it was the last time, that she would never do anything like that again. But something inside me had changed, something that couldn't be fixed. "Excuse me?" I asked, looking at her as if she were a stranger. "Forgiveness won't fix what you broke. Forgiveness won't erase the images that are burned into my mind. Forgiveness won't bring back the trust you destroyed." That night, she didn't sleep. I made sure to leave the house before dawn, leaving behind everything she could use to manipulate me. When I came back, she was silent, but her eyes were swollen from crying. I spoke calmly about the divorce, about how it would be done, without unnecessary drama. But while we were discussing the details, something unexpected happened. The man she had put our marriage on the line for abandoned her. He simply disappeared, leaving her with nothing but regrets. I watched it all with a kind of bitter satisfaction. She, who had destroyed everything for someone who promised empty things, was now alone, facing the ruins of her own betrayal. And then a question arose that I couldn't get out of my head. How can someone risk everything for so little? What makes a person break something so valuable for something that never had value? The answer was there, in his devastated expression, but I needed to understand. And that's exactly what drives me to continue. There was more to that story, more to why she did what she did. Betrayal wasn't just a choice, it was a symptom of something deeper, darker. And discovering this can be as devastating as the betrayal itself. Welcome to the channel where we explore the devastating consequences of betrayal. Here, we do not support or encourage any type of infidelity. The stories are fictional, but they serve to show how betrayal destroys lives, relationships and trust. Get ready for a shocking narrative, full of twists and intense emotions. Good story and hold on tight, because this one will be unforgettable. The ballroom sparkled under a set of sophisticated lights, reflecting in the large mirrors that adorned the walls. The place was a mix of luxury and classic charm, the kind of atmosphere that made every detail feel like part of a carefully planned show. Among the guests, Daniel walked with an upright posture and a slight formality, greeting acquaintances with a discreet smile. He was a man with a serene but attentive look, someone who knew how to capture the details around him without drawing attention to himself. Always good-looking, his presence exuded confidence, the type of person who gave the feeling of stability, of someone who was in control of his life. Next to him, Laura was the definition of elegance and charm. Her laugh was like music to many of the guests who approached, and her ability to carry on conversations, even the most banal, made her the center of attention wherever she was. Her eyes sparkled as if every moment was worthy of being lived intensely, and that was exactly what Daniel had always loved about her. They were the couple that many admired, he, a successful businessman who always seemed to have the right answer, and she, an artist with a vibrant and passionate personality. Daniel and Laura's marriage, at first glance, seemed perfect. 20 years of union had transformed their initial love into a bond that, to outside eyes, seemed indestructible. They had stories to tell, from the simple days of their youth, when they decided that love was enough to build a life together, to the challenges of adult life. There was complicity in the small gestures, like when Laura adjusted Daniel's tie or he brushed her hair away from her face during dinner. To their closest friends, they were an inspiration, proof that love could last. However, behind the curtains of this show of harmony, there was something that was slowly beginning to change. Daniel, in recent years, had dedicated himself more and more to work. He told himself he did it for Laura's sake, for the comfort he always wanted to provide her. But deep down, I knew there was something more. Work had become a way to fill a void he couldn't name. The long hours at the office, the cancelled dinners and the increasingly long silences at home were signs he tried to ignore. Laura, on the other hand, felt the weight of this distance growing. As an artist, she's always had a deep connection to her emotions, but lately, that connection has felt more like a prison than a gift. The screens that were once overflowing with vivid colors were now dominated by cold, somber tones. She tried to find inspiration in the love she had for Daniel, but the emptiness he felt seemed to resonate with her. Although they still shared intimate moments, they were far from the same as before. His touch was gentle, but distant, and the looks they exchanged no longer carried the same intensity as before. That night, the party was an attempt to revive something that seemed lost. It was the birthday of one of Laura's friends, and she had insisted that Daniel go. He accepted, albeit hesitantly. When they arrived, Laura soon got lost among the guests, greeting friends with her usual joy. Daniel became more reserved, talking to colleagues in a cordial manner, but without much involvement. The atmosphere was beautiful, the music pleasant, but something there seemed out of place. While Laura danced, Daniel watched her from afar. He knew that she loved that type of event, that she felt alive amidst the music and dance. Still, there was a restlessness inside him. It was as if, even among all those people, there was an invisible barrier between them. Something he didn't know how to cross. Throughout the night, Laura also felt the tension. Although she smiled and seemed involved, she noticed Daniel's distant gaze. She wondered at what point they had started to move so far apart. Was it when he took on that new position in the company? Or perhaps when she decided to dedicate more time to her art? The truth is, she didn't know. Everything seemed to have happened so gradually that, when he realized, they were already living in different worlds. The party was still lively, but the clock seemed to move more slowly for Daniel. He found himself looking around, noticing how other couples seemed genuinely happy. He felt a tightness in his chest as he remembered how he and Laura had once been like that. He decided to go out for a moment, breathe the fresh air outside. The silence on the street was almost a relief after the constant noise of the party. He needed a moment to reorganize his thoughts, to understand why tonight felt so wrong. Laura noticed his absence, but decided not to follow him. She knew Daniel needed space, that pushing him away wouldn't solve anything. But deep down, I feared what that space meant. Sitting in a corner of the room, she looked at the dance floor, at the lights reflecting on the floor, and felt an emptiness that she couldn't explain. There was so much I wanted to say to Daniel, so many questions I wanted to ask, but I didn't know how to start. When Daniel returned, they were met with looks that said more than any words could. There was love there, but also a distance that neither of them knew how to overcome. And as the party continued around them, the feeling that something was about to change became undeniable. It was as if the night was the prelude to a storm that they both felt but neither could name. Everything was silent between them, but within each one, chaos was already beginning to take shape. The days following the party were marked by an uncomfortable silence between Daniel and Laura. It wasn't the kind of comfortable silence that sometimes came between two people who knew each other too well, but something heavier, as if each unspoken word accumulated, forming an invisible barrier. Laura tried to act as if everything was normal, but Daniel could see the effort in her actions, in her overly careful gestures, in the way she avoided looking at him directly for a long time. He felt something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on the wound. At the same time, there was a tiredness inside him, an emotional exhaustion that prevented him from confronting whatever was hanging over them. Daniel immersed himself in his work even more. He spent more time at the office, accepting unnecessary meetings and extending his working hours for no apparent reason. It was easier to deal with the numbers, projects and practical demands than to face the issues that occupied his mind. At night, when I finally returned home, I would find Laura busy in her studio, always having an excuse not to go out or to finish a painting that never seemed to be complete. He watched her from afar, trying to decipher if that distance was just part of a phase or if something deeper was unfolding. Laura, in turn, felt trapped in an emotional maze. There was a part of her that desperately wanted to open her heart to Daniel, confess everything she felt, all the fears and insecurities that had been growing like weeds inside her. But there was another part, darker, that whispered that maybe it was too late, that he wouldn't understand, that the distance between them was already too great to be overcome. She sought comfort in small distractions, quick outings with friends, long aimless walks and, more recently, frequent messages on her phone that she made a point of hiding. Technology had become a refuge for Laura. It was a space where she could escape reality, a place where her emotions could be validated without the weight of consequences. The messages started out as something harmless, a casual conversation with someone she had met at an art gallery months earlier. He was thoughtful, kind, someone who seemed to listen to her words with an intensity that Laura missed in her relationship with Daniel. At first, she said it was just a friendship, something innocent, but as the weeks went by, the conversations became more frequent, more personal, and, eventually, more dangerous. Daniel began to notice changes in Laura's behavior. She seemed more distant, but there was also something different about her, a sparkle in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time. It was contradictory, because, at the same time that she seemed more alive in certain moments, she was increasingly absent in others. He tried to ignore the suspicions that were beginning to form, but they crept into his thoughts at the most unexpected moments, creating a knot in his stomach that he couldn't undo. One night, while Laura was in the shower, Daniel saw her cell phone on the living room table. He hesitated for a few seconds, debating with himself whether or not he should look. The moral dilemma seemed overwhelming, but curiosity and fear of the unknown won out. He unlocked the phone with the code he knew by heart and opened the messages. What he found there was like a punch in the gut. There were exchanges of long, intimate messages, with declarations of feelings that Laura hadn't expressed to him in years. The words were direct, blunt, and painted a clear picture of what was happening. Daniel closed the phone with a mix of anger and sadness. He didn't know what to do with that information. Confronting her seemed like the most logical thing, but something inside him stopped him. He needed more time to process, to understand how it had gotten to the point it was at. Over the next few days, he began to observe Laura more closely, looking for signs that confirmed what he already knew. Every smile, every excuse to go out, every message sent discreetly seemed to confirm his suspicions. Laura, on the other hand, was increasingly involved in her side relationship. The man she communicated with made her feel something that had been dormant for a long time. He made her feel seen, wanted, like she was special again. The weight of guilt hung over her, but it was drowned out by the excitement of the moment. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she increasingly found justifications in her mind. After all, she told herself, Daniel had also distanced himself, and perhaps this was a reflection of what he himself had caused. The situation came to a head one weekend when Laura made up an excuse to go out alone. She told Daniel that she needed inspiration for a new project and that she was going to an exhibition. He nodded, pretending to believe, but inside he felt his anger rising. He decided to follow her, something he never imagined he would do, but which at that moment seemed inevitable. He saw her enter a restaurant, sit down at a table, and minutes later be greeted by a man who was clearly not just a friend. Daniel stood outside, watching through the window. Every gesture between the two was like a direct blow to his chest. They laughed, exchanged glances that were unmistakably intimate, and eventually held hands on the table. It was the final confirmation, the irrefutable proof that Laura was cheating on him. He wanted to go in, confront them right there, but something held him back. He knew this was not the time. He needed to think, plan, decide what to do with that discovery that would change their lives forever. When Laura returned home that night, Daniel was already there, sitting on the couch, waiting. She tried to act normal, but he noticed the tension in her movements, the way she avoided eye contact. He watched her, silently, until she finally asked him why he was so quiet. It was then that he decided it was time to say something, but instead of exploding, he just said, with a calm that scared her, "We need to talk." The tone of his voice made Laura freeze, and she knew in that instant that things would never be the same again. Laura sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale and her eyes downcast, unable to hold Daniel's gaze, who remained standing in front of her. He had waited for this moment, but now that he was in front of her, the anger was giving way to a controlled coldness, as if he were looking at a puzzle that had finally been assembled. She knew he had found out, but she still didn't know how far he had gone, what he had seen, what he actually knew. The silence between them was almost unbearable, thick like a storm about to explode. Daniel crossed his arms, his chin firm and his breathing heavy, waiting for her to take the initiative to speak. Laura opened her mouth a few times, but the words seemed to escape. Finally, she mumbled something that sounded more like a timid apology than an explanation. I don't know how to start." Daniel let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head slowly. "Don't know where to start? How about the truth? Or is that too much to ask?" He didn't raise his voice, but the intensity of his words made her shrink even more. "It was a mistake," she said finally, almost in a whisper. "I don't even know why. I got lost, Daniel." He took a step forward, his eyes burning with a pain he couldn't hide. "Did you lose yourself?" "No, Laura, you didn't lose yourself. You made choices. Conscious choices. You decided to lie, cheat, betray. Don't pretend it was something that just happened to you. She began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as she shook her head in denial. I never wanted to hurt you. Daniel raised his hand, cutting her off. Hurt. Laura, you destroyed everything. It's not just about what you did. It's about what it means. It means that nothing we built, no moment we shared, was real to you. Because if it was, you would never have done. Laura raised her head, her face marked by guilt, but also frustration. Do you think it was easy for me? That I woke up one day and decided to destroy our life? I was alone, Daniel. For years, you were always busy, always distant. I tried to reach you, but you were never there. He recoiled, as if her words had hit him like a physical blow. So, it's my fault. Is that what you're saying? That I forced you to cheat because I was working to keep our house, our life? That's pathetic, Laura. Absolutely pathetic. Silence once again filled the space between them, but this time it was different. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that threatened to boil over. He knew he needed to remain calm, that he needed to hear everything before making any decision. I want to know everything, Laura. Don't spare me. Who is he? Since when has this been happening? I want every detail, because, right now, it's the only thing that can help me understand how far you've come. She hesitated, but knew lying was no longer an option. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his voice shaky but firm enough to reveal the truth. His name is Victor. I met him at an art gallery a few months ago. He seemed interested in me, in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. At first, it was just talk, texts. But things climbed. We met a few times. With each word, Daniel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He tried to maintain his composure, but his mind was in chaos. The name, the face he could now imagine, the moments they had shared without him knowing. Do you love him? He asked, his voice barely audible. Laura shook her head quickly. No. I never did. It was a mistake, Daniel. I was confused, vulnerable. But it doesn't mean anything to me. It never has. He laughed again, a bitter laugh full of incredulity. It means nothing. Laura, it means everything. It means you don't respect me, that you don't value what we have. It means you are willing to throw our lives away for someone who means nothing to you. She tried to hold his hand, but he backed away, his gaze full of contempt. Don't touch me. Not now. I need to think. I need to understand how, after everything, you managed to do this. Daniel started pacing around the room, his hands in his hair, trying to process everything. Finally, he stopped and looked at her, his expression hardened. Are you going to tell me that it's over? That there's nothing left? Because if you lie again, Laura, I'll know. She nodded, the tears falling again. Yes. I broke up with him. I swear. There's nothing between us anymore. Daniel was silent for a few moments, evaluating her words. He wanted to believe, but something inside him still doubted. He knew that even if it were true, the damage had already been done. There was no going back, no erasing what he had discovered. He took a step towards the door, his voice firm and decisive. I need to get out of here. I need time to think, to decide what I'm going to do with all this. Laura tried to call him, but he was already out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt and regret. She knew that nothing she said or did could fix what she had broken, but still, she couldn't give up hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way back. As Daniel walked down the street, the weight of what he had just heard seemed to crush him. He thought about every moment he had shared with Laura, every sacrifice he had made, and he wondered how it had all gotten to this point. But as much as it hurt, he knew there was still something that wasn't clear, something that Laura wasn't telling him. And it consumed him in a way he couldn't explain. The complete truth was still hidden, and he was determined to discover it, no matter what it took. Daniel spent the entire night outside, driving aimlessly through the deserted streets, his mind in a whirlwind. Laura's words echoed in his head, but he couldn't decide whether to believe her or not. The betrayal was an open wound, but there was something more, a nagging feeling that the story was incomplete. He needed answers, but he didn't know where to find them. When dawn finally arrived, he found himself standing in front of a cafe, exhausted but unable to return home. Inside the cafe, while the aroma of fresh coffee filled the room, Daniel opened his cell phone and began looking for information about Victor. It didn't take long for him to find something. A social media profile revealed him to be a charismatic, successful and engaging man, exactly the kind of person who might attract someone like Laura. But there was also something unsettling about his posts, a boastfulness that seemed to mask something darker. Daniel wrote down the address of a place where Victor used to frequent and decided he needed to confront him. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I knew I couldn't move forward without it. When he arrived at the bar where Victor used to go, the place was almost empty. Victor was sitting in a corner, alone, with a carefree expression that only increased Daniel's anger. He walked to the table, pulled out a chair and sat down without asking permission. Victor looked up, surprised, but soon recognized Daniel. A cynical smile appeared on his face. "So, you are her husband," said Victor, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "What do you want?" Daniel crossed his arms, trying to remain calm. "I want the truth. I want to know what happened between you and my wife. I want to know why she thought it was worth risking everything for you." Victor shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "Look, man, I didn't go after her. She came to me. And honestly, it wasn't a big deal. A few nights, a few conversations. You're making a big deal out of a teapot." Victor's words set Daniel on fire, but he managed to contain himself. "Are you saying it meant nothing? That everything she put on the line was for something insignificant?" Victor laughed, a low, contemptuous sound. "You don't understand, do you? Sometimes people just want something different. It's not about you, it's about them." Daniel felt his anger rising, but before he could respond, Victor added something that made his blood run cold. "But since you're here, maybe you should know that your wife hasn't exactly been honest with you. There are things she hasn't told you." Daniel leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Victor. "What do you mean by that? Say it at once." Victor hesitated for a moment, as if calculating the impact of his words. "She didn't tell you about the deal, did she? About what she was really trying to protect?" Daniel was silent, trying to process what he had just heard. "What deal? What are you talking about?" Victor gave an enigmatic smile, but said nothing more. He got up, threw some notes on the table and left, leaving Daniel alone, confused and full of questions. Back home, Daniel found Laura sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked at him with a mixture of relief and fear, but he didn't give her time to speak. "I found Victor," he said, his voice firm. Laura froze, her expression quickly turning from surprise to panic. "What did he tell you?" Daniel crossed his arms, waiting for her to respond. "He mentioned something about a deal. Are you going to tell me or am I going to have to find out on my own?" Laura took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for a deep dive. "I didn't want you to know. I thought I could solve everything without involving you. But, it's true. There's something I didn't tell you." Daniel remained silent, encouraging her to continue. Laura hesitated, but finally began to speak. "Months ago, I received a proposal. A business proposal that seemed too good to be true. But there was one condition: I needed someone to broker the deal, someone who had connections. That's how I met Victor. He was the intermediary." Daniel narrowed his eyes, trying to understand. "And why did you think this was something you needed to hide from me? Why would it lead to cheating?" Laura lowered her head, her voice full of guilt. I thought I could handle it on my own, but things got complicated. He started making advances, and at first I resisted. But I was stuck. He knew that if I didn't cooperate, the deal would fall apart and everything would fall apart. What I was trying to protect would be lost. Daniel was silent for a moment, processing what he had just heard. And what exactly were you trying to protect, Laura? What was so important that you were willing to destroy our marriage over it? Laura looked at him, her expression full of pain. I was trying to save your company, Daniel. They were planning a hostile takeover, and Victor was the only one who could help me stop it. I did it for you, for us. Her words fell like a weight on Daniel. He didn't know what to feel. On the one hand, there was a part of him that wanted to believe her, that wanted to accept that her intentions were good. But on the other hand, he couldn't ignore the fact that she had betrayed his trust, that she had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. He shook his head, unable to find words. Laura began to cry again, but this time her tears felt different, as if they carried not only guilt but also relief at finally being told the truth. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you in a way that may never be repaired. But I did it because I love you, because I didn't want to see everything you worked for destroyed. Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. Love? Laura, that's not love. Love is trust, it's respect. What you did wasn't out of love. It was out of fear. And fear destroys everything. He stood up, walking towards the door. I need some time. I need to think about what this means, what we can do going forward. But know one thing, Laura, what you destroyed here isn't going to be easy to rebuild. And honestly, I don't know if it's worth a try. With those words, he left, leaving Laura alone, once again, with her tears and regrets. Daniel drove aimlessly again, as he had the night before, but this time the feeling was different. It wasn't just anger or sadness that consumed him, but a kind of crushing emptiness, as if all the certainties he had about his life had been erased at once. Laura's words still echoed in her mind, especially the revelation about the deal. It was difficult to reconcile the idea that she had done what she had done, claiming it was to protect him, when in reality, all she could see was the result of her choices, a shattered marriage and irreparable trust. He parked the car near a dimly lit park, got out and sat on a bench. The night air was cold, but he didn't care. He needed something to connect him to reality, something to help him organize his thoughts. The silence around him was almost oppressive, but for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to sink into it. The images came to his mind without control, Laura's smile on their wedding day, the small moments of happiness shared over the years, the nights he had worked late while she waited for him. Now, everything seemed blurred, as if a dark filter covered all these memories. He knew he needed to make a decision, but neither option felt right. Laura had betrayed his trust in ways he never imagined possible, but at the same time, she claimed to have done it to protect him, to save something he didn't even know was at risk. This duality left him trapped in a moral dilemma that seemed impossible to resolve. Part of him wanted to believe her, forgive her, find a way to rebuild what they had lost, but another part, perhaps a bigger one, insisted that some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed. Meanwhile, Laura remained at home, facing the silence of the empty room. Every second felt like an eternity. She reviewed her choices over and over, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. When he accepted Victor's help, he never imagined he would end up in that situation. He had convinced himself that he was doing the right thing, but now it all seemed like a series of catastrophic mistakes. She felt like a prisoner of her own mind, surrounded by regrets and doubts. After hours of wandering through dark thoughts, Daniel finally decided to return home. When he opened the door, he found Laura sitting on the sofa, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked at him but said nothing, as if waiting for him to take the initiative. He slowly walked into the living room and sat in the armchair opposite her. The silence between them was heavy, but this time, Daniel decided to break it. I don't know what to make of all this, Laura, he said, his voice low but firm. You say you did this for me, for us, but all I can see are the lies, the choices you made without even consulting me. How did you expect this to end well? Laura took a deep breath, trying to control the tears that threatened to return. I didn't expect it. I think, deep down, I knew I was risking everything. But I was desperate, Daniel. When I saw what could happen to your company, with everything you've built, I couldn't stand still. I thought I was doing the right thing. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. The right thing? Laura, the right thing would have been to trust me. To have come to me, to have told me what was happening. But you decided on your own, as if I wasn't part of this, as if I didn't have the right to know. Laura flinched at his words, but she knew he was right. I know. I messed up. I messed up in so many ways I don't even know where to start trying to make it right. But I still love you, Daniel. That's never changed. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process those words. Love? He no longer knew what it meant to love Laura. Love is not enough, Laura, he finally replied, his voice thick with pain. Love is trust, respect, honesty. Without that, what do we have? Just empty promises and a lot of regrets. They were silent for a long time, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Laura broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you going to do? Daniel didn't respond immediately. He knew she was asking for a definitive answer, but he didn't have one yet. I need time, he said finally. Time to think, to understand if there is something here worth saving. For the next few days, they lived like strangers under the same roof. Daniel avoided spending too much time at home, while Laura did her best to give him space. Each interaction was marked by an almost palpable tension, as if any word could relight the fuse of a bomb that had already exploded. They didn't talk about the future or the past. They were stuck in an uncomfortable present, waiting for something to change. Daniel began looking for advice. She talked to friends, confided in a therapist, but no answer seemed enough. What was at stake was not only their future as a couple, but also how he saw himself. He always prided himself on being someone who could trust those around him, especially Laura. Now he was questioning not only his trust in her, but also his trust in himself to make the right decision. Meanwhile, Laura tried to repair the damage in her own way. She cancelled all contact with Victor, severed all ties that connected her to him. He tried to focus on his art, but each brushstroke seemed empty, without purpose. She knew she needed to win Daniel back, but she didn't know where to start. With each passing day, she felt that he was moving further away, and that terrified her. The tension reached a new peak when, one night, Daniel returned home earlier than usual and found Laura sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. What is that? He asked, his voice thick with suspicion. Laura hesitated for a moment before responding. They're documents. Things that can prove that what I did, that what I said about the company is true. I thought you should see it. He took the papers and started reading. With each page, his emotions fluctuated between anger, sadness, and something he couldn't name. When he finished, he looked at Laura, trying to find the right words. Does this change anything? He asked finally. Laura looked at him, her expression full of hope and fear. I don't know. I just wanted you to know that I didn't lie about it. That, at least in that part, I was telling the truth. Daniel sighed, feeling the weight of it all on his shoulders. I don't know what that means, Laura. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. But I appreciate you showing me. They fell silent again, each processing the moment in their own way. The night progressed slowly, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt a small spark of clarity. There was still a lot to be decided, but in that moment he knew that somehow the truth, however painful it was a start. In the days that followed, Daniel and Laura's house became a space full of sharp silences and interrupted dialogues. They coexisted as shadows of their former selves, each dealing with their own pain in different ways. Daniel, in his quiet determination, began to reorganize his life away from the emotional wreckage Laura had left behind. He began to dedicate more time to himself, resuming forgotten hobbies, attending meetings with old friends and trying, slowly, to rebuild an identity that was not tied to the betrayal he had faced. Despite this, he still carried the scars of what had happened, like invisible marks that accompanied his every thought. Laura, on the other hand, was stuck in a cycle of regret and self-punishment. She knew that Daniel had withdrawn emotionally, that once strong bond was now too frayed to repair. Still, he kept trying. With each gesture, no matter how small, she tried to show him that she was willing to change, to be better, but each attempt seemed to only reinforce the gulf between them. The nights were the worst. She would often wake from distressing dreams, only to find Daniel's side of the bed empty. His absence, even when he was physically present, was a cruel reminder of the price of his choices. One day, Daniel made a decision that he had been putting off for weeks. He asked Laura to sit with him in the living room for a definitive conversation. The air felt heavy, as if anticipating the weight of the words that would be spoken. Daniel looked at her, his eyes firmer than ever, and began to speak. "Laura, I've thought a lot about all of this. About us, about what happened, about what could still happen. And as much as it pains me to admit it, I can no longer see a path for the two of us together. Some things, when broken, they simply can't be fixed." Laura tried to argue, her voice choked with emotion. "Daniel, please don't do this. I know I was wrong, I know I hurt you in a way I never should have. But I'm trying. I'm here, willing to do whatever it takes. Can't we at least try?" He shook his head, his expression sad but resolute. "I understand you're trying, but it's not just about you. It's about me too. I need to move on, Laura. I need to find peace, and I don't think I can do that while we're still stuck in all of this." She broke down, her tears falling freely as she tried to process what he said. But deep down, I knew he was right. The betrayal was not just about the act itself, but about everything it represented, all the fissures that had accumulated over the years and culminated in that definitive break. "If that's what you need, I won't stop you," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "But I want you to know that I will always love you, Daniel. Always." The separation was painful but necessary. Daniel decided to sell the house and divide the assets fairly, keeping the process as clean as possible. Laura moved to a smaller apartment, away from the memories that house carried. Daniel, in turn, found a temporary refuge in a place closer to the office, while he sought to understand what the next chapter of his life would be. He realized that, despite everything, there was still something to be built, even if it meant starting from scratch. Weeks later, while walking in a park, Daniel met someone unexpected. It was a woman he had met years before at a casual event, but with whom he had never had the chance to connect deeply. The reunion was simple, without pretensions, but, as they talked, he realized that there was something there, a lightness that he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't know if it would turn into something more, but for the first time in months, he felt like there might be room for hope. Laura, on the other hand, began to find solace in her art. After months without inspiration, the emotions he carried began to be translated onto his canvases. His paintings, once full of cold colors and fuzzy lines, now had a depth that reflected his own journey of pain and growth. She decided to exhibit her works in a small gallery, and, to her surprise, she received sincere praise from people who saw something authentic in the paintings, something that resonated. As for Victor, the man who had played a central role in the destruction of their marriage, his life took an unexpected turn. He was involved in a financial investigation related to the company he worked for, and his name appeared on compromising documents. He tried to escape the consequences, but his arrogance prevented him from realizing that he no longer had control over the situation. Eventually, he faced legal repercussions for his actions, losing what he had achieved in such a calculating way. In the end, everyone involved was forced to face the consequences of their choices. Daniel found the strength to start over, Laura learned to deal with her regrets in a way that helped her grow, and Victor paid the price for his manipulation. Their story ended as it should, with lessons learned and separate paths, but not without leaving deep scars that would follow them forever. And now, we want to know, what did you think of this story? How do you interpret each character's choices? Comment your opinion, subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this, and remember, here, we believe that betrayal is not just a mistake, but a choice that always has consequences. Until next time.